being said, we're going to move to our restart and kind of go over everything. And as Mrs. Bartlett and Mr. White are getting in place, I would share that that the K-5 that we shared in June is still, we're going to have all the K-5 kids in school all day, every day. And as you hear the different pieces that we share today, there's some separation between the middle school and high school, not a lot. But the learning management system that Mr. Spielbrenner will do applies for everyone. And then the cleaning, sanitizing, which is, we'll wrap it up with Mr. Paramore discussing that, will be consistent within all our buildings. So
Mr. White and I'm Kate Bartlett. I'm one of the assistant principals at Ashland High School, and obviously this is Mr. White, who's principal at Ashland Middle School. We're going to be talking a little bit to you with you today about our restart plan for grades 6 through 12. So like Dr. Mayer said, he's already outlined our plan for K through 5, and we're excited about that. And we're excited to kind of talk to you about some of the things that we're going to be incorporating the middle school and the high school. This is just our mission overview. Our overall goal is always to serve the students and the families within our district. And we really started to think about what could we do to make sure that we gave the most opportunities to meet the needs of our families here in the community. So we have some options. Families can choose what they'd like to do. If they're not comfortable coming back into physical spaces yet, we are going to have some remote learning opportunities for them with their teachers. Students can stay at home and engage in remote learning through our learning management system, which is Canvas, and Mr. Spieldenner will be talking more about that here shortly. Families who are ready to send their kids back, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that, and then later in the afternoon or evening, we'll talk about some of the mitigating risk factors that we'll be taking during that time. So if they are coming on campus, this is grades 6 through 12. We are going to offer our normal in-person classes available to all of our students. We're going to have some extra mitigating risks and safety protocols. We are going to be creating a flexible schedule that's going to allow for our students to adjust with recommendations from University Hospital, who we've been working a lot with, and Dr. Mero will be talking about that. We also are following our ODH guidelines. Our Ashland County Health Department and other local officials are kind of coming together to work on this plan. One thing that's really unique and I think great about this plan is it allows such flexibility that we could be all online. We could phase into any phase we need to all remote, all because of our learning management system and some of the things that we're going to be implementing this year to make that feasible.
Things parameters we had to consider as we sat down to really discuss what we were doing. The first thing was aligning the schedule between the high school and the middle school. We do share staff. We do also have students that are being taught with at the high school for high school credited courses. So we had to make sure one of the things we're looking at, one of the parameters we need to look at was our staff and our students and aligning those between the high school and the middle school. The second thing we looked at was limiting the number of students in the building when possible to mitigate risks. And I know the high school has some things. You want to reflect on that real quick in terms of options for juniors and seniors, or you want to wait?
Sure. Nope, okay. We can talk about that real quick. So when we look at our 9 through 12 student population, we know that in our juniors and seniors population specifically, we may need to allow for some flexibility for those juniors and seniors who are in good standing, and they may need to take some different remote learning type opportunities. And that's one way that we can really flex the number of students in our building and still serve those students and provide a quality curriculum for them. So we're excited about that and those options to kind of lessen the numbers but also still provide that experience.
I'll continue the third one over to the right. The limit amount of student movement throughout the building. This was a thing we need to take a look at because currently, just middle school as our example, we have 9-period day, and when you add coming to school, leaving school, there's 2 transitions, very large movements with students, and that's a concern of ours. Then you take 9 periods and doing that throughout the day. There's several mass groups moving throughout the school day. So that was another parameter we had to take a look at and how our movement was going to take place throughout and during a school day with 9 periods. And I know the high school looked at their schedule as well. And then we had to align those 2 things to try to make it work. So, you want to continue?
Sure. I would echo what Mr. White has said about, we were looking at how our kids are going to be moving throughout our building and how many times we want them to move. And the more that we can kind of narrow that down, the better. That flexible 2-day rotation throughout the week is really important because it lessens by about half the changes in our student movement. I'm going to go down to the bottom here, and one of the features that we were looking at is to make sure that we're building in time for teachers to develop that high-quality curriculum that they've been doing for a long time. The learning management system that Mr. Spieldenner is going to be talking about will allow us to do that. Having that time to still give students who choose remote learning an option to connect with their regular teacher, I think is really valuable. I think there's some things that are going to set us apart from other districts is the personal touches that we put on our curriculum with our students and with our families in the community. Like I stated before, we're going to be able to adjust our numbers as needed based on input from state and local officials. So once again, we could be all 100% in person if needed, all the way down to 100% remote learning at the drop of a hat if we need to. And that's largely because of our learning management system. Each student at AHS will have a remote learning time where, just as we're expecting that our teachers are building that curriculum, students have access to that curriculum during their day, whether they're at home and remote learning or in person. So if you are in an area where you don't have a lot of internet access and you're choosing to come in all the time, we're providing time in your day where you can still access those things and troubleshoot that information and get to where you need to be academically. And you're going to have help along the way. Intervention is another thing that we've really talked about. We have some gap closing measures for our academics that we want to make sure are in place. And this is for any student who needs it. What it looks like at the high school is a little bit different than what it would look like at the middle school. At the high school, we would give a specific time period, like either at the beginning or the end of our day. We're working with some teacher cross-section groups between the building leadership team at the middle school, and we have a cross-section of teachers at the high school where we're kind of pinpointing how do we want to use that time, what does it look like, what should we be doing during that time, and how can we best serve kids during that time. So that intervention time, I think, will be really important moving forward. Do you want to talk a little bit?
Sure. Middle school, we already have a time scheduled in. It was previously going to be put in anyway, so this worked out very nicely. It allowed another time period where students can, again, access. We also need intervention time. Students that need that extra help, an intervention specialist perhaps can pull kids, do what they need to do, progress monitor, and so on. So it's now embedded and put in the schedule and allows our teachers to have that one-on-one contact with them as needed. So I think it's another piece. Again, we felt we lost that need a few years ago. We kind of eliminated it. It was something our staff was passionate about bringing back anyway. So when we started looking at these parameters, we were able to incorporate that back in anyway. So it worked out very nicely. The last section here just talks about staggered arrival times. Going to be tricky, but I think if we stagger between our bus drop-offs between the high school, currently we drop students off in one location, Mass, high school, middle school, all in what we consider our bus loop. We are going to stagger that where half will be, the high school will be dropped off at the high school, another half will be dropped at the middle school, and they'll flip, take those kids over and bring ours over in 2 different locations so that we can, again, not have that bottlenecking of students all in one area. So we're going to do the best we can in trying to look at that. So these were the parameters as we were looking at the schedule, looking at students returning, staff returning, and trying to maintain some type of normalcy with seeing students again. These were the parameters we faced as we moved forward.
At the high school level, some of what we're doing for staggered arrival and dismissal is the same. Some of it will need to be tweaked a little bit from what the middle school does, just because we have a certain clientele that are able to drive, whereas our middle schoolers aren't. So we're going to be staggering our time, and Mr. Walter sat down with our team, and we kind of went through that, and we kind of had like 15-minute increments throughout the morning where if you're a bus rider, if you're a walker, if you are a driver, if you have a parent who drops you off, what does that look like? What door do you go in? And what's the expectation when you're coming in the door? So we're going to be asking all of our families, K through 12, please take your child's temperature before you send them to school. If they have a fever of 100 or more, please keep them home. We will be taking student temperatures when they come in our building. And with that, they'll have assigned doorways and entryways that they'll come in as a point of contact. We are working through setting up locations that are very close to the entrance so that if a child was showing a fever, we would immediately have a place where we could say, okay, we don't need you to go through the whole building, but let's get you set up, let's call your parents, make sure that they're aware of that, and we can make sure that we're doing an appropriate referral for them for their medical attention. That's going to be really important as we start to define those spaces, the spaces where students maybe would have normal medicine pickup during the day or things like that. That will need to occur in a different location, so we're going to have separate spaces for those. Also at dismissal time, at the high school, we have different zones that can dismiss at certain times. They have different grade level teams and wings within the middle school. So we can control what that looks like pretty well, and we're confident in that. So. Okay. I'm going to start on the far left side. So talking about that rotational schedule, some people have asked about what does that look like? What does that mean? What it basically is we've come up with 2 schedules that more or less frame out our classes. And we have organized them in a way with our teacher cross-section groups, a way that we can do roughly half of our classes one day and another half the next day. And with that, they're just going to continue to rotate one after the other. So it's consistent. Over a 2-week period, you meet the same number of times per rotational schedule. These classes are between 80 to 90 minutes, depending on where you're at, if it's the middle school or the high school. So one of the things that we'll be talking a lot about is professional development for teachers on teaching within that time frame. It's going to shift how it looks a little bit, but I'm confident. I've been doing a lot of research about that it's going to be very useful. And then adding in that regular intervention for our students to promote that additional gap closing feature that we want to make sure we're continuing to provide, and then going above and beyond for anyone who may need it.
Class time talks about the aligning between the high school and middle school. Again, we feel like we've coordinated that. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how our staff can move and also the students that need to move appropriately and coordinate those between the high school and the middle school. We feel like we had that worked out. We have a couple of tweaks with Taft and middle school yet to figure out, but between the high school and the middle school, we've been able to work out those differences and making sure that we're not losing instructional time with that. The last one here allows for building staff working on remote learning. Again, on a 9-period day, we have our staff daily will have an opportunity to have a planned period plus some remote time to work on this remote component. We know it's a big task. We understand that families are going to choose, multiple families are going to choose not to perhaps send their student back to school in a physical setting. Just talked to a parent today. And with that, we need to make sure we provide that education for them. That's why we've got to make sure our staff is able to utilize some time during the day to create those lessons remotely. And we've been pretty successful so far on paper, looking like we can do that. So,
Do you also want to comment how we share the staff with Taft also within the schedule? You talked middle school and high school.
yeah, again, and I haven't talked to Taft for a month or so yet. So, but when we left in June, at the end of June, I did talk to Mr. Keller and Mr. McDonald both. And looks like, again, we have a couple of specialist student staff members, or encore we call them, and we have about a 10-minute window we got to work on of getting a teacher back to our building in time. But I'm confident we can get that accomplished. So, question.
So as we're starting to frame this out, I recognize that there will be a lot of families in the community who want to kind of say, well, we're leaning one way or the other. And I think that data is very important for us. So this week, it'll probably be out, I would say, either Tuesday or Wednesday. So tomorrow or Wednesday, we have a short survey that's going to be going out. It's going to be on our websites. It'll go out as an all-call reminder as well. And it does not commit families to any one specific option. It is going to allow us to generate some data as to roughly what percentage of our families want to do one or the other, or some compilation of that. And I think that's going to be really important as we're finishing these final details moving into the fall. So there will be a parent survey coming out shortly this week, so I would be looking for that. I know some other things that we're going to be putting online are going to be like some of the things that we discussed in this meeting if people weren't able to tune in or view it on their TVs. So.
Hi, I'm Ben Spildunner. I'm the Director of Professional Development for Technology Integration and Innovation. And I'm going to share with you what our plan is for our remote option. We spent a lot of time looking at several different learning management systems. At the end of the school year, we utilized the Google Suite and Google Classroom a lot. And educators really poured themselves into that, creating videos and creating content. And so basically what I wanted to do is I wanted to find a platform that allowed our educators to be able to do what they do very well, which is teach, in a way that is a lot more conducive to the way they would be doing it in the classroom. And Canvas, it's not a silver bullet, but I think it's a much better option than relying solely on Google Classroom, and I think there's a lot of reasons why. So I'm going to give you a broad overview today of Canvas. I'm not going to get into all the nitty-gritty details because I could be here for years. But I did want to share with you a little bit of what this kind of looks like. Canvas has been around for a while. It's utilized pre-K all the way through college, actually, with lots of different options. And we approached this very student-centered. The idea was, after getting information from parents and from students, we heard a lot about consistency of information, the way things looked, how do I access the information, where do I look for things. And so that's one of the things that I tried to focus in on, was this idea of consistency. And so there are templates that are made for each building, and they're unique to each building and to each grade level. I spoke with administrators, teachers, tried to get a lot of input on this with the idea of making this transition from what we have been doing in Google Classroom to Canvas pretty much as seamless as possible for pretty much everyone involved. And so the idea behind the templates is there are a few items where students and parents can find information that'll be consistent between teachers, but there's still a lot of leeway for customization, both in the homepage and beyond. And so this will help us streamline some of the communication. So you can see an example here of the Ashland High School template page. And as we move through, the middle school look very much like this, and even the elementaries here. Another reason why I went with Canvas is because we get a lot more data. So teachers have a lot more leverage in terms of seeing who has logged in, who has watched videos, how long have they watched for. There are a lot more interactive possibilities. It's a lot easier to keep track of all those kinds of things. So all of these things basically led us to this decision. Canvas also gives, I think, better parent access. Parents can see a little bit more in terms of what is it that is expected. And so you can see here, this is a template of the elementaries. Similar piece of information, looks a little more geared towards his age levels. But parents have the opportunity to be able to see exactly what is expected of their child. There's a built-in calendar with due dates, so they can see when various things are due for themselves. They can see point values of assignments, they can see rubrics, they can see a class syllabus, they can even see a class discussion board. There's an opportunity for parents to message teachers within Canvas. And so it's kind of a one-stop shop for all of those things. And so we had a lot of teachers that were utilizing a lot of outside resources, which was great. The idea was to try to simplify that for parents, students, and teachers, and to have it all built into one learning management system. We have 2 week intensive PD sessions. The idea was to put it out there for staff to attend one of those week sessions, and right now we have over 60% of the Ashland City School staff registered voluntarily for an entire week of professional development. And so I was extremely happy about that, and that does speak volumes in terms of how much our staff really do care about their students, care about their kids. And so I think this speaks volumes. And so in those 1 week intensive sessions, the idea is to turn teachers into experts in Canvas, and then also give them time built in to collaborate with their grade levels, their content areas, to start to create modules. And that's one of the other things I love about Canvas is it should really encourage collaboration among those teams to be able to help each other create content. And then beyond that, the week of August 31st, the first week back for staff, we'll have multiple training days as well. Those will be more about the basics of Canvas, not as much in-depth, but everyone will have at least a basic understanding of how everything works and how to utilize everything. The people who have taken the 1 week intensive will be considered advanced, and so during that week, they'll spend their time basically collaborating with their team to, once again, continue to create those modules and that content for both in class and for remote learning. In addition to this, we're in the process of creating some guides in order to help student, parent, and teachers through this process of remote learning, particularly utilizing our LMS. And so there are 10-step guides for students, parents, and teachers. I mean, kind of see what this looks like now. Canvas is fairly intuitive. There's a lot of depth to it. There's a lot you can do. But it's designed in such a way that it is extremely user-friendly. And so that's kind of what these are designed to show. Canvas is also built very different for those 3 different audiences. And so they built 3 separate apps because of that. So these are free apps that are available to teachers, students, and parents. The teacher app will allow teachers to actually be able to grade on a mobile device if they would like to. They can post some information. Students can access assignments through their phones. They can actually turn them in through their phones. And then parents also have access to be able to view a lot of what their child has due and those kinds of things. So really, I think what I like about this is it allows teachers and parents to communicate, I think, a little bit easier. It gives teachers a little more leverage in terms of seeing what students are doing and what they're not doing. And it also gives parents an opportunity, a window to see what their child should be doing, whether it's in class or whether it's remote.